Good morning, everyone. I'm Barbara Kaufman, Executive Vice President and COO at Newark Regional Business Partnership, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our first webinar of the year. Before we begin, I'm going to make a few opening comments and describe the format to you and tell you a little bit about what's coming up at NRBP. We are continuing to offer our programming exclusively online in light of COVID, and we hope that you'll continue to join us. We hope that in the spring we'll be able to return to some outdoor networkers, and by summer or fall, maybe depending upon what happens, able to come back to some return to in-person events. The next program that we have coming up is this Thursday. We will have a virtual happy hour, and at that happy hour, we'll be hearing from Black-owned brewer, Montclair Brewery. So please make sure you join us. We'll have the opportunity for every attendee to introduce themselves. So it's a great way to meet some other leaders in the Newark region and to be able to talk about your own work and services. Watch our calendar. We are entering our 4th year of work that we're doing in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we feel that we really have developed a very strong offering of programs, thanks to Maya Curry, who's been leading that effort. And we will be shortly announcing that we have a program on Black-owned businesses as part of the Black History Month celebration in February. And in March, our celebration of Women's History Month will be about women making history, as opposed to women who are historical figures in the past. In February also, we will have a program on the hospitality industry and what we expect to see that will also involve the Convention and Visitors Bureau of Greater Newark. And in March, on March 3rd, we'll have our annual real estate market forecast. And we'll be announcing that lineup very shortly, but suffice it to say that we have some new players, we have some interesting stories, and one pretty major company that we'll be including in that program, and I think you'll really want to sign up for that. So please watch for the announcements or check our website. I also want to acknowledge and thank NRBP's Transportation Council. This is a very active group of our members that help us to put together our May Awards Breakfast, at which we honor the unsung heroes, people who are behind the scenes and making a difference in the transportation industry. That always happens during Transportation Week in May, and we are planning for that to happen again this year. And in addition, they help us to plan our symposium that we have in November, which is on a topic that's important to transportation. Finally, the Council maintains a priority list of projects, and among them has been Newark Penn Station for quite a long time. So we're delighted that this morning we're able to talk about Newark Penn Station as well as the Bus Network Redesign Project. The format for this morning is that you will all be in listen-only mode and off camera. There is a questions area, and we invite you to pose questions there. For any information that's described that you might want to reference, you'll see the chat box. If something comes up in the chat box, it's very often Maya posting useful information. A commonly asked question is whether the presentations will be available after the program, and the answer is they will not be available. This is a one-time experience. You will be seeing more from New Jersey Transit as plans are finalized, but this is a window for you to be able to get an inside view into what's happening with Penn Station improvements and the Bus Design Network. There is a survey that we will circulate after the program, and we encourage you to take that, particularly if you're a regular bus rider. So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Jeremy Colangelo Bryan, and he will introduce Rich Schaefer immediately following his presentation, and then Rich will introduce R.J. Palladino for the Bus Network presentation. After that, I will be reading the questions and fielding those questions for a few minutes, and Chip Halleck, NRBP's President and CEO, will close the program. So with that, I am going to leave for the next few minutes and welcome Jeremy to continue the presentation. Thank you.
Great, Barbara, and thank you very much. Thank you to NRBP for having us. We're certainly happy to share our current thinking and some exciting projects that we're looking to kick off in and around Newark and Newark Penn Station specifically. So just to give folks, again, a bit more of the run of show here, I'm Jeremy Colangelo. I'm the Chief Planner at New Jersey Transit. My partner in this presentation is Rich Schaefer, who's the Chief Engineer. So our presentation will focus specifically on Newark Penn Station and the master planning and design efforts that we're kicking off vis-a-vis the station itself. RJ Palladino, who's in the planning shop, is heading up with some of his colleagues, including myself, the work on the bus system redesign for the Greater Newark area. So it's two different but complementary pieces of work. So I just wanted people to have that sense going forward. So we'll spend about 20 minutes on the Newark Penn issues and then hand that off to RJ. So Newark Penn Station, just an aerial view. I won't sort of go into details, as I'm sure folks are familiar, but station was built in about 1935. It is situated kind of on the edge of the CBD, obviously sort of nestled between the Ironbound district and the downtown business district of Newark. Obviously with great strategic sort of advantages if properly kind of realized in terms of its regional access and connectivity. And again, folks on the call, I'm sure, are familiar with those things. So as we look at the station, of course, it's contextualized in the Newark area, and we look at obviously the station itself, but also the development and potential for development around the station. And the characteristics of those types of developments can be quite different if you're looking at the south or east, depending on your sort of orientation here, or the west or north sides of the station. Lots of exciting activities in the area, and we're certainly looking to make sure that our planning is cognizant with that sort of work. So the station, again, I thought it's always good to have a couple of kind of historic views, and I know Rich was thinking the same way when he put his together, his presentation. So you'll see a couple of these images or facsimiles of them repeated, but the station itself, really an architectural jewel. This is obviously an earlier presentation of the station as it sort of looked before lots of other development came around. Obviously, this precedes the gateway development, et cetera. So you see it in its sort of more original state. I'll also note, just as I end mine with the discussion around the frontage roads, that the surroundings of the station and the access certainly looks a lot different today. And as we do our work, we need to make sure that we're planning not just for what's happening today, but also the future of access and mobility, and make sure this is a real hub for mobility in the region. Just a couple of more shots to give people a sense. Obviously, a fairly grand waiting area in the original construction of the station. And again, it's situated here and sort of in context. And then some details architecturally. These are obviously more modern photographs, but it is blessed with some architectural detailing that, unfortunately in today's environment can be hard to appreciate. But the bones are there really for a remarkable, I think, passenger experience. It's also, and the image on the left here is sort of shot from the ramp that comes down from the upper level, platform H, where the PATH trains are generally speaking, the eastbound PATH trains will board in the off-peak, and it just sort of shows that it's a pretty complicated station. So we have the old Hudson and Manhattan line, which is now the PATH system, of course, the direct line from Newark down to the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, and of course connections at Journal Square to other locations throughout the waterfront of New Jersey on the Hudson River side, multiple different rail services here. The majority, of course, New Jersey Transit. Much of that is run through service, so service that comes from New York and goes to points west and south, but also, of course, the Raritan Valley Line trains. Some of those originate and terminate in Newark, and of course, Amtrak as well. And of course, on the lower level here as well, you have PATH, which is a bi-level kind of an operation. So this, again, just to give a sense of the sort of complexity, we have done some work at NJT to prepare ourselves for the larger effort that Rich will talk about. And the planning effort really focused on pedestrian circulation. That is a significant part of the customer experience, and the station, because of some of the complexity I talked about before, and I didn't even get into light rail and bus, but the station, because of the way it's arranged and because of how it's developed over time, is characterized by some fairly complex pedestrian, i.e. customer moves. And so this is a graphic that shows you a plan view of those platforms, of which you got a snippet just before in that image. And it shows you what the existing kind of vertical circulation is. And hopefully it's not too sort of technical here, but basically the stairs and escalators are those sort of green ovals with alphanumeric indicator, and in the purple are the elevators. And it just sort of shows how people can get in and out of each platform. So there's a lot of cross-platform moves here. People needing to go down to the concourse, along the concourse, and back up to reach another train, a connecting train. So some of the Raritan Valley line services, if you're connecting to PATH, depending on your movement, you're making this move, and it's not a great move. It can be constrained in the rush hours, or what has traditionally been the rush hours, because there are not that many ways to get from the track level down to the concourse level. And so in our earlier work, and this goes back a couple of years, in our earlier work, we looked at the volumes of passengers, and hopefully folks will bear with me on this one. The next couple of graphics show essentially heat maps of passenger distributions, and the blue is basically less activity, greens, reds, yellows, those, and you'll see some of those colors going forward. Those are areas where there is more crowding and congestion. And so we looked at those volumes as we came up with how do we address the issues of vertical circulation. So the reds are the worst, so to speak. Orange is one step below that, yellow, green, blue. And so we're really looking at those areas of pinch point and crunch, trying to come up with some programs and strategies to address some of that cross-platform circulation, and also just movement from track down to the concourse level. And so again, this was the same graphic, just to orient people again. This is what's existing, and then we looked at the ability to potentially add, for example, stair, escalator, elevator circulation in the areas that you now see highlighted. So these are the proposed, in our planning work, these are the proposed new circulation elements to try to alleviate some of those bottlenecks that you see. So we did a variety of work to sort of position ourselves on that front. We also looked at just the platform levels themselves and at the waiting areas, and ways that we can make modest improvements that would have outsized benefits. So this is just an example of looking at door configuration. So right now, the existing door configurations, which are on the top, you'll see that because the doors are very near the top of the vertical circulation element, that can cause congestion. So that's that first graphic on the top there. If we move the doors to the west, we can open some things up. If we implement sliding doors or single directional doors, there are a variety of ways to try to, again, improve pedestrian flow and customer flow through the station. And in our view, doing some of that just intrinsically will improve the customer's view of the station. There's a lot more to do, but one of the basics obviously is make sure is that it can function as a transportation facility, and really how passengers move within the station is a key component of that. Looking then downstairs at the concourse level, and just to orient folks again, this is the main concourse that you see in the graphic, centrally located. To the right are the bus lanes, the Raymond Boulevard bus lanes, and to the left is Market Street and the Market Street bus lanes. So we looked at the main concourse sort of in that context. And again, this is just really for circulation analysis. We're not proposing that there's any specific intervention that we've selected at this point, but again, looking at circulation and building entrances shown in blue, at paths of travel, which are those primary circulation corridors shown in the thinner red lines, and again, the relationship of those to the vertical circulation shown in green, trying to think through how could we re-envision the station to facilitate better movement, of course, a better customer experience overall, which gets to other things that Rich will talk about as well. But at this point, looking just at the circulation, you could open up the station in different ways. So this would be a slightly different way of doing things with better use of what was the old Hudson Manhattan Concourse, the North Concourse there. So where you see D4 and B4, for example, new circulation elements down to that concourse that give customers more options to get down to concourse, either to leave the station or to make those platform switches that I was talking about before. And we looked at a variety of options there, and then what could you do with the spaces that you created. So what are the retail opportunities? Obviously, we need to make sure that from a railroad and bus and light rail operating perspective, we have sufficient back of house space to support the operation. That we've sized the mechanical facilities to make sure that we can keep the facility cool in the summer and warm in the winter. So we took a variety of kind of looks through that lens to understand, how significant an intervention could we make, and so these are just different sort of options there. Again, this is more or less the sort of base that we're at now, and could we do something like that, open it up while retaining a lot of interior space, pivoting off of the waiting room as well. Could we do something more intensive? And so this gets rid of, if I go back for one slide, you'll see those gray rectangles in the middle are functional and retain their space. Or could we get rid of them overall and create a completely open concourse, which sort of unifies the existing main concourse and the north concourse? Now, I'm not saying that any of these things are the direction we're going, but it's just to give folks on the call a sense of the kinds of work we've been looking at, as we're just talking about within the station itself, and the relationship between circulation and then some of the issues Rich will talk about in terms of kind of opening up the architectural feel and functionality through engineering interventions for the waiting area and those sorts of things. So I just want to kind of set the stage for Rich by talking about the circulation elements interior to the station, both in terms of the platform, i.e. track level, and also downstairs at the concourse level. I'll take a minute since we have it here to just note that the bus, so just to give folks a sense, in normal times, we roughly count around 30,000 average daily rail trips at Newark. It's a little tough to count Newark because there are lots of transfers and the trip making is relatively complicated, so it's not as simple as sort of origin destination. But in rough numbers, we have about 30,000 average daily movements on the railroad, but we have about 24,000 of those same movements on the bus and light rail network. And so, and then you throw on, in addition to that, of course, PATH, which has a lot of transfers, but also has some amount of origin destination travel here. So how people access the station and how they move between modes is really important. So again, I'll just highlight the bus lanes, which are, again, on both sides of the station. The predominant volume of buses on the Raymond Boulevard side. And of course, right by those bus lanes are the access points to what is now the Newark Light Rail. Some of us will never stop calling it the city subway just because we have that in our head. But the Newark Light Rail system has a couple of different access points that are, somewhat difficult to find, and unless you're sort of familiar with the station, can be sort of counterintuitive. And that's an important connection to make sure that we consider as well. And of course, then in the broader context here, we have what we refer to as the frontage roads, or Plaza West, Plaza East, and of course, Market Street and Raymond Boulevard. And the situation we have now, of course, we have an historic station. Whatever we do in terms of the exterior, we're certainly sensitive to the contextual approach to make sure that any interventions are done, appropriately in a way that is reflective of the nature of the facility. These are just a couple of examples of modifications or enhancements to other historic properties in a way that, this is all done in concert with the State Historic Preservation Office, of course, but making these interventions in a way that is sympathetic to the historic value of the resource is something that's important to us. And so as we look at those kinds of interventions and the relationship of the station to the exterior, we need to be cognizant of the fact that, again, this may seem like a long time ago now, but in normal times, we are dealing with these sorts of conditions of very crowded roadways, and people really kind of struggling in some cases to access the station in a way that's easy and sort of reliable. And so as we look at the station and its exterior and the interventions we may make on the exterior, we're of course cognizant of facilitating all users and all modes to be able to have that easy access to the station. In the period leading up to COVID, of course, we saw a growth in the transportation network companies, so the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, with pretty significant increases in activity for those providers. We have lots of sort of local shuttle services that access the station. We have the traditional taxi cabs coming, queuing in off Alling Street. We have the traditional just passenger drop off and pickup, but we also have a very significant number of folks getting to the station by bicycle, and we saw increases in other micro-mobility, like electric scooters and those sorts of things. So as we re-envision the station, we have to be cognizant of all those things. So as I turn it over to Rich, and I think I've left you enough time, Rich, again, the station, the circulation as a base, but then looking outside of the station to historically sensitive context for how we re-envision it in its surroundings and how we make sure that the access modes are appropriately handled are all key drivers for us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rich to talk about next steps.
Hello, everybody. So I'm going to talk about what's going to come next for the station in terms of what you're going to see from us on a capital perspective and an infrastructure perspective. So let's go to the next slide. And the goal that Governor Murphy set forward for us is to bring the station back and make it the hub that it is supposed to be. The commitment promised by the governor is a lifeline to the station that has been long neglected, with the goal of creating a future hub for the entire city. I like to think of it as all roads lead to Rome, and a gateway for growth. When you come into New Jersey, most travelers will travel through Newark Penn Station. It should be our crown jewel, and that is something that we are going to work very hard to make certain that we can do with the funds that we have. Next slide, please. Jeremy and I both have lots of pictures of this structure because we both love it. This is an Art Deco masterpiece, which is my personal favorite style of transportation architecture. And by and large, the way it was built and the way it is now is mostly intact, save for a few tacky add-ons here and there. It's still what it was always meant to be, which is something the New York Penn Station didn't have the luxury of keeping. Next slide, please. Some of my favorite portions of the building, which are still largely intact, are the grand waiting room, which we intend to restore. It is my second favorite view of the station from this vantage point. You can see that light streams in through the windows in the day, not as much as when it was originally built due to the buildings adjacent, but it's still a very light, bright, high open area space and a focal point of the station that we fully intend on bringing back to the way it was always meant to be. We also have the head houses on the platforms. The platforms themselves, from track level up to the ceiling, are in a state of needing repair. Platform E is the standard we tend to shoot for. That's the track 5 that was recently restored. We are moving forward with platform D, which serves tracks 3 and 4 for restoration effort. And we plan on working our way all the way across the station to bring it up to where it needs to be as a world-class station. Next slide, please. Right there in the middle is my favorite vantage point of the station, staring down the ramp from platform H to platform D. And you really get to appreciate the fantastic steel work. The designers didn't have to do this. This is all very complex, hand-shaped, arched, riveted steelwork, and it's fabulous. And one of the things that we really want to introduce is this is a focal point. It is breathtaking when it's in good condition. This all needs to be repainted, restored, and brought back to the way that it's supposed to be, and hopefully highlighted with some good lighting so that people can appreciate the value that went into this. But there are other challenges in addition to just paint and lighting. There are platforms that are deteriorating. There are overhangs that we don't even look at anymore that need to go back and be revisited. Platform D recently had some minor repairs done via Amtrak. We plan on going back and doing it all to the highest standard we can to match platform E. And that's just the level of the station. Downstairs is a completely different set of challenges. Would you go to the next slide, please, Sharon? Where we, on one hand, we have this lovely, wide open, high, airy, grand waiting room, and then the concourses themselves are low and dark. We do our best to keep the station in a state of good repair, particularly at the concourse level, and now more than ever, cleaning has been escalated, and you can see how the floors shine. But there's opportunity there to revision that. The station, as you see it now, is not how it was constructed. It did have a lot more flow through and pedestrian concourse access back and forth, but as offices and concessionaires were added, it has become much more tight with many more dark corners. And one of the things that we really want to focus on is a grand revisioning of that space to turn it into the community hub that it needs to be to meet the grand vision of this being where everybody wants to go. Next slide, please. And there are real opportunities. We have a commitment of some substantial funding via the governor's recent announcement. We have a chance to cultivate a very welcoming site, both inside and outside. Much of the space around the station is either untouched or ripe for redevelopment, which Jeremy noted before. We have a blank canvas for the concourse. Much of it has been modified over and over the years. So while there are many restrictions in place, by and large, it's a wonderful opportunity to revisit what a community center should be underneath a train station. And that's something that we really want to focus on. And that is something where we're going to do our best to make every one of those dollars count. Next slide, please. So the plan, in broad strokes, only so much we can talk about, but we want to restore the historic exterior effort, the historic exterior of the station. Much of the brickwork is falling away in poor condition. You can see netting underside of the rail viaduct. All that, we want to bring it back to the way that it was originally intended to be and to the architectural standards that we need to follow for something that is on the National Register. The platform level is going to be modernized. We want to get that up to an idealized state of good repair where it is a welcoming, comfortable, and world-class place to wait and get off of your train. The concourse level will be revisioned from scratch. Jeremy's team has done an amazing job studying where passengers come from and go to regionally as they interact with the station and in the city itself. And that's something we want to capitalize on. Make sure that the flow is where it needs to be. It's comfortable. You can find your way, eliminate dark corners, and make it an inviting place to be. Outside, we have opportunity for green space improvements, a variety of other aspects that we intend on touching, making it accessible for all, and then also just making it a station that is worthy to be called Penn Station. There are very few stations left that are called Pennsylvania or Union for that matter, and we want to make this one something that is more than the poor cousin. Next slide, please. So here's the action. We are planning on imminently putting together and advertising a preliminary design RFP, which is going to include some master planning effort, preliminary design, infrastructure work, all the aspects that I talked about and more to make this place what it needs to be, and we're going to do it quickly. We are going to target federal grant opportunities to make every one of those dollars we get from the state count, particularly upstairs at the platform level, to get the condition improvements, the aesthetics, and the passenger flows necessary for intercity rail terminal. We are going to leverage all the local efforts that are focused in and around the city to help flow to and from the station. Jeremy is done all the research that we need to help build that out into what it needs to be. And we're going to build a stakeholder engagement program to make sure that everybody who focuses on the station, relies on it to be the gateway to the city, is all going to get built in together. And that is where we are going to go very quickly. So please stay tuned for the RFP. And that's all I have. Robert, or RJ, I'm sorry.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm just switching over to my screen. Okay, and everyone should be able to see my screen now. Hello, and thank you very much for having me today. My name is RJ Palladino. I'm the Senior Program Manager at New Jersey Transit and leading the team on the Bus Network Redesign, which we have branded New Bus Newark. And I really want to thank you about the opportunity to talk about the study for the Greater Newark area. We're excited to share this effort with you today. We think the timing is really right, and there's a real opportunity for a comprehensive redesign of the bus network here in Newark. The overall goal is to deliver better bus service that meets the needs of our customers, the Newark community, and best optimizes our resources as an agency. And a very important component of our work is feedback from the community and the businesses in the area. So we really want to work with you as partners to help get our word out and get some insights on needs for the bus system. So to talk about some of our needs that we have and why we're some of the goals that we're trying to address. We want to reverse interstate bus service ridership declines within the study area. That's something that we saw pre-pandemic, and we know it's something that we need to address now. We want to redesign the bus network to better align with our customers' needs and within available resources. We want to enhance the customer experience and really ensure an inclusive and equitable mobility, connecting individuals and communities with key destinations. So talk just a little bit about where we are right now and why now we're doing this. As I stated earlier, we have year-over-year ridership decline, particularly on local bus service. We know that portions of the network have been unchanged for decades. At the same time, we know population and travel has changed. The strategic plan for NJT 2030 called for a redesign of the entire bus system. Newark is an area where we really do need to concentrate some of our work. And finally, we have to acknowledge that COVID-19 has changed demand, and it's something that we have to work our way through, but we don't want to wait until we are done with whenever COVID-19 ends to address that change. So we want to be cognizant of it, but that challenge a little bit. The pandemic requires changes to how we do our outreach. The project, and that really means thinking about public engagement, meetings and field work. How do we conduct it in a pandemic environment? The project will consider both pre-pandemic needs and changing needs in a COVID and hopefully soon a post-COVID world. Our consultant team, TMD, continues to undertake projects like this, and we are really prepared to respond to any unique requirements due to the re-up as we get into the recovery. And New Jersey Transit has found ways to connect with the public, including online board meetings, public project meetings, and forums like this to ensure that we're talking to stakeholders and engaging community participants. So to talk about the service area, as you know, New Jersey Transit provides service on a statewide basis. This area in Newark is really one of our most dense, one of our biggest local bus networks that we have in the state. Pre-COVID, we had 180,000 weekday riders with nearly 1 million people living within a quarter-mile service and over 400,000 jobs in quarter-mile service. So the ingredients are truly there to offer real opportunity to connect people with jobs and activity centers all in a very concentrated area. We saw this in where we should initially focus our efforts. So our key milestones and what we've been doing on the project so far, we've been evaluating the existing system, taking a look at ridership and connections and data. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to pause for a moment. I'm not sure, did my audio drop out?
I think it's okay, RJ.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just sometimes it's a little, you know, the new environment can be challenging at times. So we are taking a look at evaluating the existing system, taking a look at data and ongoing evaluation of what the system is doing today and how it operated both pre-pandemic and during the pandemic. We're rapidly going to be moving into the goal setting for services and strategies and developing draft service recommendations later this spring and final service recommendations by the end of summer. An important part of this is that we're going to have ongoing stakeholder and public involvement, everything from meetings like this, one-on-one meetings, meetings with key stakeholders. We're very happy, and it really helps us in shaping the vision for this system. We don't want this to be just a New Jersey Transit vision, but a vision of the community as a whole for what the needs are for transit service in the area. So some of our engagement strategies, we have today, actually we'll be going out today, an online survey that we have with our existing customer base, with non-riders and with people of the business community. And I will be sharing that out through the regional partnership, how you can get to that survey. We will be having virtual meetings like today and other meetings that we've either had or will be having in the future. We are going to be trying to push this message out in social media, so something a little bit different than how we typically have communicated, but we're trying to find all channels possible to communicate information about the project. And then finally, we have our stakeholder advisory committee where we have some people that are active in it. I'll leave some contact information if anyone else would like to be involved in the stakeholder advisory committee meeting process. I'm sure we can find some way to get you included and get your voice heard. So when we talk about existing conditions, it's really in two broad categories. Take a look at the market demand and mobility needs. We take a look at how the service operates. So under market demand, we look at the built environment, where people live and work, how people travel. Some of that is taking a look at our own ridership, but some of it is also taking a look at general travel trends in the region. We also take a look at changing demographic trends. On the service side, we look at how riders use the system, our network connectivity, how well do we connect to areas within the study region, within the Greater Newark area, how that service operates, and how well that service performs. Where we're going to be going next is we're going to conduct a route level analysis to better understand performance. We'll integrate results from community, from the rider and non-rider survey. So we really want to get that perspective from outside of New Jersey Transit. How do people see, how do people experience the bus service we put out there today? We'll develop a toolbox of service options that match service to market typologies. And we're going to really use these key findings from existing conditions to help develop and design the guidelines and guiding principles for how the draft network plan should be set up, how it should function. So here's the important part, and if there was one thing you're going to take away from today, other than the fact that we're doing this study, is that we'd like you to be involved. We have a project website. It's accessible right off of the main NJ Transit page, njtransit.com/newbus. Help us spread the word. I am going to provide a basic fact sheet that will be sent out to all the meeting participants today, give you some basic information about the project and ways that you can get in touch with us. We are going to have that online survey launching today, and it'll be, again, off of the main project website, njtransit.com/newbus to access the survey. It's right up the top of the page. And then finally, you can contact the project team at newbus@njtransit.com. So there's a lot of ways that you can access information about the study, and then there's a lot of ways that we can get your voice heard. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I think we have a little time for Q&A, and thank you very much.
Thank you all. That was terrific. We do have a bunch of questions, and I am going to do my best to go through them for you. The first one is because of the focus on the integrity of the architecture, is anyone giving consideration to replacing the bridge that has sometimes been referred to as the gerbil tube from the station to the gateway complex? Is that in consideration?
I'll take that if you don't mind. We're looking at the station holistically, and what I will say is it's not something we're looking at in particular, but it's not off the table. It's understood it's a bit of an eyesore, to put it mildly, but it does offer flow and a necessary connection. And I would defer to Jeremy to talk about how necessary that flow is and what it should be. I do know it's unair conditioned, which is definitely a problem.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rich. And certainly, you know, it speaks to what we were talking about at the very beginning about the station in the context of its environment, with sort of the heavy focus on sort of office development, the central business district type development on Plaza West, and the really different context of the Ironbound on the other side of the station. So, you know, and then if you fold that in with the fact that people are now accessing the station, you know, in all these different ways, and that Plaza West is very, very sort of congested and busy, you know, I think you'd have to understand the kind of trade-offs. Definitely, as Rich and I showed you at the beginning, those photographs don't have a off-street connection into the station there, right? Obviously, that was sort of a grand architectural edifice there, and it, you know, certainly is a little bit obscured right now. But the way the station functions in its environment and how it can be a resource to the whole community is really part of what the whole effort will look at. So we're, you know, at this point, we're not making any declaratives, I think, about any particular element.
Okay. Another question. This is actually also with regard to the exterior of the station. The traffic on Raymond Plaza West. I believe that you were talking about that issue pre-COVID being really significant. But if you were able to move the access to the Hilton garage, that might help to alleviate. You know, I know Gateway is doing a lot of work. To what degree have you been talking with them about different ways that the two of you together can alleviate the traffic flow problem on Raymond Plaza West, which also, by the way, is a pedestrian problem because it's hard to cross when there are so many cars stacked up there. Right.
So yeah, we've certainly been in communication with Onyx, which is the developer there, vis-a-vis their improvements, their proposed improvements on Raymond Plaza West. You know, it does get, Barbara, to the issue I was raising before in terms of the tube, right? Which is, if you get rid of that, as you rightly mentioned, there's a pedestrian issue. How do you get folks across the street there? And so in terms of the overall question around the Plaza West, I think, and again, that was towards the end of my presentation, the last slide or so, what I didn't show you is the sort of imbalance that exists with the heavy focus on Plaza West. And there may be opportunities around the station more generally to try to sort of pull apart some of those functions. What you have today is basically everyone trying to drive to the 50-yard line, which is right there at the sort of the middle of Plaza West. And the result of that is sort of not a great experience for anybody. So one of the things we're looking at is, again, in the context of the neighborhood and with the station as a resource, how do you develop protocols and plans and projects that allow people to access it by the mode they need to access it, but, you know, that keeps a priority on the pedestrian side, on again, folks who are coming in and out of the station from the surrounding community, who are going to destinations in the community, so that they have the easiest and most friction-free path of travel. And right now, obviously, well, not right now, but in the sort of context pre-COVID, the environment does not work very well. I was referencing the growth of all the Ubers and Lyfts, et cetera, of the world. That has created more traffic on Plaza West, and that's part of what the master plan effort will do. We'll look at the station in context to make sure it can be that community resource.
Okay. I'm going to attempt to combine several questions together. They all relate to contracting. So the questions are, have construction companies already been selected? How can we learn if there are still opportunities, what those opportunities are? Then the second part of that is it going to be let as one contract? Would the RFP be one contract or multiple contracts? And the third part is with going to the federal funding, to what degree will that open up DBE, WBE, MBE opportunities for firms to come in? And I guess that really relates to the size of the contract and whether you'll be dividing it up or offering it as a single contract. So hopefully I've covered a couple of people's questions with that.
Well, that's a big shopping list, and let me know if I miss anything in the pile. Contracting wise, right now there are contractors active in the station doing some basic state of good repair work to get it up to snuff. It's relatively what I would consider small scale, just stabilization, appearance, cosmetics, functionality, cleanliness, those aspects, and they're on the hop. We foresee an RFP for a designer forthcoming shortly to come on board and help us with a lot of the design aspects, the master planning aspects, and met through that. The contract structure for construction has not been determined yet, so you can infer from that we obviously haven't selected a contractor for it. And that is something that we will be developing with our consultant to figure out what that structure looks like, if it is one or multiple contracts, to address how this is progressed from soup to nuts and from concourse to platform level. We do intend, our policy is generally to follow federal procurement procedures, which does include, of course, all the standard DBE, SPE requirements, which we would follow anyway. So that's all on the table. Did I capture everything?
I think so. Just one small follow-up. If there is any hope of getting funds from the federal government, to what degree is that going to impact your schedule if you're doing work with federal funds?
It depends where those funds are spent, how they're spent, and the process steps that go with it. The federal process is longer generally than the state process, but the state historical process is easily as rigid as the federal one, although Jeremy can tell me if I'm overstepping. He knows that process better than I do. That being said, yeah, we're in the same bucket either way, and there's a time frame that comes with these things. What I can tell you is we are aggressively pursuing the first steps of that, which is getting the consultants on board through the advertisement of that RFP.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Another question, and this is actually one that I have as well. The plan for the Mulberry Street Bridge that went from the plaza outside of, that will go, I should say, from the plaza outside of Prudential Center over to the Ironbound, called for access directly to the tracks. And I wondered to what degree is that being planned into the station design, and where does that stand time-wise in your mind?
Right now, that project exists outside of the continuity of transit, and Jeremy can talk more to that if I miss anything. But our work is explicitly going to integrate the development of that project, which is still in early stages. So to say that we have a plan for exactly what it is, we don't know where it stands beyond basic concept level, is probably a bit premature. What do you think about that, Jeremy?
No, I think that those are all fair statements. Yeah, we're certainly aware of it. We've been, kind of involved on and off for a number of years. I will also just note, Amtrak is the owner of the right-of-way. The station itself is per agreement with Amtrak based under New Jersey Transit Control, but the tracks and the northeast corridor of it extending on either side of the station is owned and controlled by Amtrak. And the last plans that I've seen vis-a-vis Mulberry Commons will kind of introduce a new train shed over the northeast corridor there. So as we've advised for quite a while, the engagement with Amtrak is essential there. It's actually not simply New Jersey Transit who who needs to be involved in the approvals of that. But certainly we've been aware that it's an opportunity, right, to do what we've been talking about here in terms of creating a resource that benefits the community around the station. So, certainly interested in how the development of that can go forward. It is fairly far west or south of the sort of the heart of the action, so to speak, of the station. The station platforms, just to digress for a minute here, except for they're quite long for the most part. And so when you look at the station in plan view, while it looks very kind of, it looks pretty simple to connect across to those western ends of the platforms, they're actually really pretty far away. So as Rich was saying, kind of outside of the scope of a lot of what we're looking at specifically. But if there's an opportunity to integrate it and to keep the station sort of being that much more activated, we certainly welcome the opportunity to see what could be developed.
Okay. Two remaining questions. One is with regard to the bus shelters. RJ, you may have mentioned that, but a question came in about what's the thinking on redesign of the bus shelters?
Our primary focus is really going to be on the bus network itself, but I think part of that certainly becomes when you know where the buses are going, taking a look to see how well resourced we are on bus shelters is something that really the project should at least take a look at. I know we have a new contract, I think that may be going forward relatively soon to renew the bus shelters, but that may be a little bit outside of what we're doing right now. So I think for right now, what we're looking at is really the network, but I think there are going to be a list of some things that may fall outside of this immediate project, but are part of the longer term vision and need. So we're going to concentrate initially on where the buses go, but I think as we look at customer experience, hearing where bus shelters really either need to be or may need to be improved is something that certainly goes on the list of improving that customer experience.
And if I could just add to that for a second, Barbara, just for the awareness of folks on the call, we have about 18,000 bus stops across the state, and we don't maintain them. We don't generally maintain the shelters that are on some of those bus stops. So we work with our local partners in the city of Newark. They have city of Newark has a contract with an advertiser to provide the maintenance for those shelters. So, from a policy perspective, we're talking about, being happy to talk about the types of shelters we could provide. But generally speaking, New Jersey Transit does not actually maintain the shelters, and that's obviously as important, if not more so, than actually providing them at the beginning. So just wanted folks to have a little bit of context for that as well.
Okay. I said before I had two more questions, and now I still have two more questions because one more came in, and I have one myself. The one that came in is the bus network redesign and the exclusive bus lanes. And the question is whether the study will look at the exclusive bus lanes and the whole Go Bus, those routes.
Yes, I mean, I think that is part of how we would look at when we look at how the service operates today and how it may operate in the future. Obviously, at any point in time, if we were looking at dedicated bus lanes, our work and our continued coordination with the city of Newark is a really important aspect of that. We have some good experiences so far with services that we put in place, and I think that a future vision would certainly try to identify where there might be opportunities for that. Again, sort of focusing on where do we need to run the service and then seeing what ways that service might be expedited through certain areas. So the City of Newark is going to be a key partner that we need to work with for any of the visioning of how that might operate in the future. Jeremy, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
No, that sounds great, RJ. Thanks.
Okay, final question. It's with regard to stakeholders, and one of the things that NRBP prides itself on is member referrals. It's something that we really go to a great degree to be able to connect our members with opportunities. So my question is, to what degree would you be able to keep us informed of when there are opportunities, and how would our members be able, is there a website they can go to know when RFPs are being let? And then finally, the final aspect of that question is that our Transportation Council, as I mentioned in the opening, has a priority list of projects. And this one has been actually both aspects, the bus network and also Penn Station renovations have been on our list. And to any degree that you need us, we are available to be supportive, to write letters, to endorse anything that we can do that would help move the project along. We'd be very happy to participate. So question, how do the members find out? How do we help to convey the information to our members, and how do we help you? You're muted, Rich. You're muted.
Sorry about that. What I will offer is that our SVP of Capital Programs, Eric DeLeo, gives a regular update of where we're at with projects and when they're expected in terms of fiscal quarters. I can tell you, you should keep your eyes out for this one. We do hope to have it out soon. And I will let him elaborate on that in one of his regular presentations, or as he sees fit. In terms of advocacy on your part, we are looking for help putting together our understanding of where we want to go with this with our consultant, who will then hopefully help us create a number of materials that we will use to communicate with others through the master plan, through the preliminary engineering effort that will help facilitate the discussion even more. So I would stay tuned for that.
Yeah, and I'd offer Barbara, again, vis-a-vis the master plan, if anyone has specific interest in there, feel free to contact me, Barbara, through you, I guess, or what have you. But happy to talk with anyone with specific interest in the master planning portion and sort of development of initial designs, especially in terms of the area around the station, as we've been kind of talking about again and again today. So, we're certainly happy to have that conversation.
So if any members are listening that want to be connected to Jeremy, I'd be happy to make that connection. And with that, I am going to turn to Chip to wind up today's program. Thank you all.
Thanks, Barbara, for facilitating that discussion. And thank you, Jeremy and Rich and RJ, for informing us this morning about things that we certainly need to and want to be on top of for the benefit of our members. We've been longtime advocates for increased funding for New Jersey Transit, both on the state level as well as certainly most recently on a federal level during the pandemic, and know that the funds that have been put to work will have long-term benefit for us, both in terms of rail transit as well as on the bus front. I know that was always a surprise to me when I first learned about the number of people that take buses and rely on them every day, and certainly a great number of Newarkers do. So I think the fact that you're taking a fresh look at the redesign is terrific. I urge our members, you've gotten information this morning about how you can participate in various ways, whether they be on the stakeholder group or through surveys. Also, please let me know what your interests are so that we can amplify your voice as we do our participation and talk to the many members that we have from the business community, from the nonprofit community, hospitals, the universities. We have a very broad range of members, and we want to funnel as much information as we can and reinforce your messages to the greatest extent possible. So please do keep us in mind and reach out to me at any time. With that, again, we very much look forward to these improvements. We need to keep people and goods moving throughout this region, and this is a great opportunity for us to improve the level of service, improve the comfort of customers, and we're really glad that you're taking on this project amid so many other things that New Jersey Transit's working on. So to the three of you, thank you very much. We're also grateful always for being able to interact through Anthony Greco, and as well as having the opportunity to have Kevin Corbett address our members from time to time as well. So we appreciate the exchange of information and look forward to supporting you, as well as supplying our members with as much information as they can to be productive. So with that, be safe. Thank you very much. We hope to see all of you, our members, on a subsequent event, whether it be our upcoming happy hour, our real estate market forecast, or any of the other programs that we have. We look forward to continuing to provide value to our members. So thanks again. Take care, everybody. Be well.